Hello and welcome to Toya in Stitches. In this tutorial, we're going to be making a simple cardigan using the offset half double crochet stitch. To make your cardigan, you're going to need your materials. So first up, you're going to need your yarn. I'm using Red Heart Comfort, and this color is called white with black fleck. It's just white with little black bits in there, sort of has a tweed vibe going. And you're going to need a couple of hooks. For the main section of my cardigan, I'm going to be using a 5.5 millimeter hook. And then for the ribbing, I'm going to be using a hook that is a half size smaller. So I'm going to be using a 5 millimeter for my ribbon. So you're just going to need your yarn and a corresponding hook. Whatever the hook size you're using for the main section, just choose a hook that is a half size smaller to do your ribbing. You're also going to need some stitch markers, a tape measure, tapestry needle, and some scissors. So go ahead, grab your supplies, and let's get started. The first step in making our cardigan is taking our measurements. So I'm going to go through and quickly show you how to take each of the measurements that we will need. And first, you will take your bust measurement, and you're going to do that around the widest part of your bust. Then next, you're going to take your armhole depth and measure from the top of your shoulder to where your arm opens up right under your armpit. And then you're going to take your arm length from the center of your neck to your wrist, and I want you to do it exactly as I'm showing you because this will give us a more accurate sleeve length for the drop sleeve we're going to be using. And then finally, you're going to be measuring how long you want your cardigan to be. So measure from the top of your shoulder to where you want it to end. And I will link a video that will help you in more detail on how to take your measurements if that is something that you want to take a look at. And now we're going to move on and start stitching. We're going to start off by making our back panel. And our back panel should measure half of our bust measurement. So whatever our bust measurement is, we're going to divide it in half, and that's the width of our back panel. For this cardigan, I am adding 6 inches of positive ease. So to my bust measurement, I'm going to be adding 6 inches and then dividing it in half. So for me, my bust is 34 plus 6 gives me 40 divided by 2, that gives me 20. So my back panel needs to be 20 inches wide. For this cardigan, I did make a gauge swatch just to calculate my stitch and row counts. I will leave that information for you in the description, my gauge information, as well as estimated starting chains for each section of the cardigan, as well as row counts. So you can go ahead and take a look in the description. I did leave a lot of information in there for you. So go ahead and do that. And we're going to start off by making our chain. So I'm using the offset half double crochet stitch, and that stitch can be worked over any number of stitches. So you just need to make your chain as wide as you need it, or you can test out using the estimated chains in the description. I'm going to be starting off with a starting chain of 61. So I'm going to go ahead and make my chain. I'm going to chain 61, and then I'll meet you back when you've completed your chain. I have completed my chain and I double checked my count. I have 61 chains. So for row 1, we're going to be working a row of just regular half double crochet. So working into the second chain from the hook, I'm going to work a half double crochet. I'm also going to be working into the bottom bump of my chain, but you can work into your chain anywhere you're comfortable. So I'm just going to yarn over, and in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to work a half double crochet. And then I'm going to be working a half double crochet in each chain across. So go ahead and just work a half double crochet in each of your chains until you get to the end of the row, and I'll meet you there. I've completed my row 1. I've finished all my half double crochets. So now for row 2, we're going to start working the offset half double crochet. So we're going to turn our work and we're going to chain 1. In the first stitch, you're going to work a regular half double crochet under the top 2 loops of the stitch from the row below. So just work a half double crochet like you normally would. And now to start working the offset half double crochet, you're going to start working into the spaces between the posts of the half double crochet stitches. So we already worked a stitch in this stitch right here, so we're not going to work into this first space. We're going to work into the next space. So we're going to yarn over and insert our hook between the posts of the next 2 stitches, like that. So I yarned over and pulled up a loop between these 2 stitches here. And then I'm going to yarn over and complete my stitch. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to insert my hook in between the post of the next 2 stitches, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on my hook. And that's just how you're going to work your stitches all the way across your row. So just yarn over, insert between the post of the next 2 stitches, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, work a half double crochet. Continue doing that until you have 2 stitches left, and then I'll show you how to finish off the row. I'm at the end of my row where I now have 2 stitches left. So how I'm going to finish off the row is I'm going to work a stitch in between my last 2 stitches. So I'm going to yarn over and work a stitch in the space between the last 2 stitches. And then I'm going to work a half double crochet in the top of the last stitch, just to keep the edges straight. So that's how you'll finish off each row. So at the beginning of each row, you're going to not work into the first space. And then when you get to the end of the row, you're always going to work into the final space and in the top of the very last stitch. But I'm going to work row 3 with you. So just chain 1, turn your work, work a half double crochet in the top of the first stitch. And now we're going to start working offset double crochet. So we're going to skip this first space and work into the next space. So into the space between the post of the next 2 stitches, work that half double crochet and continue doing that. Continue working in between the posts of the stitches across the row, and then I'll meet you at the end of the row to show you how to finish off the row. So I'm at the end of my row. I have 2 stitches left. So what I'm going to do to finish off my row is I'm going to work a half double crochet in between the post of the last 2 stitches, just like that, and then work a half double crochet in the top of the very last stitch. And that's how you're going to continue working until your back panel is 4 inches less than your desired length. Because we're going to be adding some ribbing to the hem, we want to minus how much ribbing we're going to do. And I'm going to be working about 4 inches of ribbing on the tail hem of the cardigan. So my length I'm working with is about 30 inches. So my back panel is going to measure 26 inches when I'm finished working. So you're going to continue working until your back panel is 4 inches less than your total desired length. And then we will just finish off. I'll show you how to map out your shoulder stitches so that once you're working your front panels, you'll have the same amount of stitches on your front panel as you do your back panel, just so you know where to sew it together. But before I move on, at this point, what I like to do is I usually like to lay my piece out after I've worked about somewhere between 3 and 6 rows. I don't want to get too far in. And then I'm going to measure it just to make sure that I am achieving my desired width, because I don't want to get too far in and then realize that it's too small. So at this point, I'm just going to grab my tape measure and measure how wide my piece is. So for me, my piece should be about 20 inches wide. So I'm going to measure that out just to see if I am where I want to be. And I am at my 20 inches. But if you get to this point and you measure it and it is too small or too long, what you want to do is just take your tape measure and measure out how many stitches you are either over or short by, and then just either subtract or add those stitches in. So if I was to say I was at 21 inches, but I don't want to add any extra room to my cardigan, I would take my tape measure and measure out how many stitches I have within 1 inch. For me, I know I have 3 stitches per inch. So what I would do is I would frog everything and just make my chain again with 3 less chains. That's all I would need to do. And if it was too small, you know how many stitches you have within 1 inch, then you add that amount of stitches per inch that you need. So if I was at, say, 18 inches and I needed to get to 20, I have 3 stitches per inch. So I know I would have to add 6 stitches in order to add in that 2 inches that I'm short. So that's what I like to do. I like to, just before I get too far in, measure to see where I am and what I need to do before I move on, because I don't want to complete my back panel and then realize that it is either too big or too small. So any adjustments you want to make it here and then continue. So I'm going to continue working my back panel, and when I'm on my last row, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to show you how I finish off my back panel, and then we move on to the front panels. I'm about to work my final row, and when I'm working on a cardigan, I like to leave a lot of space at the back of my neck. I don't like when the front panels meet directly in the middle with only a couple of stitches in the middle. I like to leave a lot of room. I leave about 6.5 inches. On this one, I'm gonna leave 6.5 inches. If you don't know how much room to leave at the back of your neck, what I suggest is grabbing, say, your favorite t-shirt, one that fits you around the neck really comfortably, and then you're just going to lay it down, and you're going to grab your tape measure, and you're going to measure the width of the opening of the neckline. So you just grab your tape measure and measure it out. And on this one, I have 6.5 inches, which is the number I normally use. So you're just going to measure your t-shirt, see what the neck opening is, and that would be a comfortable amount of space to sit at the back of your neck so it doesn't feel too tight around your neck. So for me, based on my gauge, I know I'm working with about 3 stitches per inch. So for me to get that, I know 3/6 is 18, and then I can't use a half a stitch, so then I'll add 2 more stitches. So I'm gonna have 20 stitches along the back of my neck that I'm not going to work into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a couple of stitch markers. I know I have 60 stitches all the way across, so I just need to count 20 from one end in and from the other, and then just mark those stitches. So I have 20 stitches remaining in the center of my back panel. Okay, so I've marked off the stitches that are going to sit at the back of my neck. So I have 20 stitches. So from this stitch marker to this stitch marker, I have 20 stitches, which is going to give me 6.5 inches to comfortably sit along the back of my neck. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work my regular offset half double crochets until I get to this stitch here, and then I'm just going to work single crochets. So just the same way I would do the offset stitches, I'm just going to work single crochets instead of half double crochets. So I'm going to work until I get to the stitch marker, and then I'll show you what I do in this section right here. Okay, so I've worked into the space up until I get to my stitch marker. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take out my stitch marker. I'm going to work a single crochet in the top of this stitch right here. Single crochet in that stitch. And then I'm going to replace my stitch marker. And now I'm going to skip this space and work a single crochet in each of the spaces until I get to my next stitch marker. So skipping this space right here where I just worked into the stitch, then a single crochet here, and in each space between the stitches until I get to my next stitch marker. And then when you're almost at your stitch marker, you're going to work into the space before the stitch marker. So just work a single crochet there, take out the stitch marker, work a single crochet in the top of that stitch, replace your stitch marker, and you're not going to work into this space here. You're going to work into the next space, continuing to work your offset half double crochet stitches. So skip the space of the stitch where you worked into the top of the stitch, and then work into the next space, and then continue working your offset half double crochets until you get to the end of the row. And that's it for my back panel. I'll cut my yarn and fasten off. And I like working my necklines on cardigans like this. I just like working a stitch that is slightly smaller, that shorter than the stitch I'm actually using for the body of the cardigan, just so it sits a little bit more comfortable along the back of my neck, because I find the neckline of when you just work straight across and then attach the front panels and then do the ribbing, it tends to be tight for me anyway around the neck. So I just work into the stitches along my neck, a stitch that is shorter, and that makes it more comfortable for me. So you can let me know in the description if this works out for you as well. So now we're gonna move on to our front panels. And then when we're working our front panels, we're gonna be working in exactly the same way we're working our front panel. We're gonna just be making two halves. But what's gonna happen is when we get to the top of our front panels, we're going to be decreasing our stitches. So we have the same number of stitches at the top of our front panel as we do along our shoulders right here. But I'll show you how to do that. So our back panel is finished, and now we're going to move on to working our front panels. Now we're going to get started on working our front panels. And to work out how wide we need each panel to be, all we're going to do is subtract 2 inches from the width of our back panel and then divide that number in half. For example, my back panel measured 20 inches wide. So when I subtract 2 inches from that, I have 18 inches. 18 divided by 2 is going to give me 9 inches. So each of my front panels will be 9 inches wide because we want to leave some room to account for the ribbing that we're going to be adding. But I'll also write that down in the description just so it's written there and you don't have to remember it. So you can go ahead and chain until your chain is the width that you need, or you can start out with the estimated starter chains I've also left in the description, and then we can make adjustments from there. So I'm now going to go ahead and I'm going to work my chain. I'm going to be chaining 28 so that I end with a total of 27 stitches. So I'm going to work my chain and I'll meet you once I have my chain done. I have my 28 chains here, and like I did on my back panel, I'm just going to start working half double crochets into the second chain from the hook and each chain across. So that's not going to change. So I'm going to skip the first chain and just work a half double crochet in the second chain. And then I'll work a half double crochet in the next chain. And I'm just going to continue working half double crochet stitches all the way across my chain. So you can go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you at the end. I've finished my first row. I've completed my first row of half double crochet. So now we're just going to chain 1. We're going to turn, and like we did on our back panel, we're going to work a half double crochet in the first stitch like we normally would under the top 2 loops of the stitch. And for the second stitch, we're going to be working between the posts of the next 2 stitches. So we're going to skip that space and then work into this space between the next 2 stitches right there. A half double crochet there, and do the same for the next stitch and for each stitch across, just like we did on our back panel. So go ahead, do that, and I'll just remind you how to finish off the row. I'm at the end of my row, and just as we did when we were working our back panel, when we get to the end of our row and we have 2 stitches left, we're going to work a half double crochet in between the last 2 stitches. So in that space right there, we'll work a half double crochet, and then we'll work a half double crochet in the top of the very last stitch. And you're just going to continue working in rows like you did with your back panel. So from this point, you're going to continue working, and you're going to work the same number of rows that you did on your back panel. So your front panel and your back panel should have the exact number of rows. But what you're going to do is, before you finish off your panel, come back and I'm going to show you how to decrease the stitches. And I'm going to use the last 3 rows, which is about 1 inch. So once you get to that point, come back and I'll show you how to decrease the stitches so that we have the same number of stitches at the top of our panel like we did across each shoulder on our back panel. So go ahead, work your panel, and then when you're just about done, come back and we'll do the decrease for the top of the shoulder. Okay, so I'm almost at the end of my front panel. So right now what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be decreasing some stitches. For me, I know I need to take out 7 stitches. So I need to decrease 7 stitches across the top here. How you know how many stitches you need to take out is when you finished off your back panel, we had those stitches in the center that go across our neck that we're not going to be working into. The number of stitches you need to have at the top of your front panel should be the same number of stitches that are on the shoulder, which is on either side of your back panel. So for me, my front panel has 27 stitches. The amount of stitches I'm going to be working into to join my front panel to my back panel is 20 stitches. So I know I need to decrease by 7. So all I'm going to do for me, I am going to now chain 1, and I'm going to work a half double crochet in my first stitch, and then I'm going to work an offset half double crochet in my next stitch. And now I'm going to start to decrease. So I'm going to work 2 stitches together, and then I'm going to work 1 stitch, then 2 stitches together, and then 1 stitch 7 times, because that's the amount of stitches that I need to subtract from my row. And you just want to do this as evenly as possible across the row. So as I said, now I'm going to work 2 stitches together. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to insert into the space between the stitches like I've been doing, pull up a loop, and then I'm just going to insert my hook into the next space. So in between the next 2 posts, pull up a loop, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on my hook. So now I have decreased by 1 stitch here. So now I'm going to work just a regular offset half double crochet in this stitch right here. And now I'm going to work another decrease. So I'm going to yarn over, insert into the space between the posts, pull up a loop, insert my hook into the space of the next, between the next 2 stitches. So this is what it's going to look like. I've pulled up a loop between these 2 stitches and these 2 stitches. That gives me 4 loops on my hook. I yarn over and pull through all 4 loops. I've now decreased by 2 stitches. That was my first decrease. That was 1. This is 2. Now I need to do it 5 more times. So I'm going to work 1 stitch, and then a decrease, which is 2 stitches together. And now a decrease, just a regular stitch, sorry, so just 1 regular half double crochet. And now I'm going to be working another decrease, which I'm going to be working 2 stitches together. And that's how you're going to be decreasing. So you're going to continue doing 1 stitch and then a decrease, 1 stitch and then a decrease until you have subtracted the number of stitches that you need to. So I need to now do 4 more because I already have 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to do 3 more. So I'm going to do that 3 more times, and then I'm just going to finish off my row as I normally would. I have finished working my decreases, and now I'm going to count my stitches just to make sure I have 20 stitches. So now I have the correct number of stitches. Now I'm going to work my final 2 rows. But what I'm going to do is, as I'm working this row, I'm going to show you how to make sure that you're not adding back the stitches, just because once you work 2 together, sometimes it's hard to see where you're going to be putting your stitches. So we're just going to do that together. So I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to work until I get to my first decrease. All right, so I'm here, and now I'm going to be working between this stitch here. This stitch is one of my decreases, and then that's the space there. And what you want to do as you're working, you want to tip your work towards you so you can see the top of the stitches, and then you're going to yarn over and just make sure you're inserting your hook below the top 2 and the 3rd loops, and then pulling up a loop so you know that you've only now worked in between 2 stitches. Because what you don't want to do is to accidentally push your hook through your actual decrease. So just pay close attention to that. You're putting your hook on either side of where you worked 2 stitches together. So if you need to just tip your work forward so you can see the top of the stitch, and then insert your hook below the top 2 and that 3rd loop of the half double crochet, pull up your loop, and then work your stitch. And then this is what it's going to look like. So you have a stitch there and one there, and then essentially a fat stitch right there, which is the two stitches together. And it has a wide base, so there's one leg in one stitch, one leg in the other stitch, and then the completed stitch right there. So just pay close attention when you're going across your row on this one, just to ensure that you're working on either side of the decrease and not accidentally pushing your hook through that decreased stitch. So I'm just going to continue working offset half double crochet across my row. And then I have one final row after this to do. So I'm just going to do those 2 rows and then I'll come back. All right, so I've finished my front panel now. I've worked those final 2 rows. I've done my measuring and made sure that my panel is the length I need it to be, counted my rows to make sure I have the exact same number of rows on this panel as I do on my back panels. So now all I have to do from this point is just fasten off and work on my other one. And this is what it's going to look like once you're done. The top is just going to taper in on either side ever so slightly just to account for the stitches that we decreased. But once you sew everything together, you won't notice the tapering. And then we're going to be adding ribbing on one side and the sleeve's going to be on the other side. So you won't even really notice it. So go ahead and make your second panel and then we'll come back and measure out our sleeves and work on our sleeves. For our sleeves, we need to figure out 2 things. We need to figure out how wide our sleeve needs to be and how long our sleeves need to be. So our first step is to figure out how wide our sleeve is going to be. And to figure that out, all you're going to need to do is your armhole depth. You're going to multiply that number by 2. For me, my armhole depth, when I take my measurement, is 7 inches and I add 1 inch to that measurement just to give the sleeve a little bit of room. I don't want it too big or too small. I don't want it to fit my arm. I want it to be slightly bigger. So I'm going to add 1 inch to my armhole depth, which is going to give me 8 inches from the top of my shoulder to the opening of my arm. I'm going with 8 inches, and then I will double that number. And that's going to give me 16 inches. I have one of my sleeves here, so I'll show you. So the width of my sleeve, when I lay it flat, is 16 inches. So I make my chain 16 inches wide, and then I just work my stitches until I have gotten to just about my desired length. I'll explain that in a minute. So that's all you need to do to figure out the width of your sleeve. It is your armhole depth plus 1 inch and then multiplied by 2. I'll leave that in the description as well. Now for the length of your sleeve. You're going to work your rows until you get to the length that you need. And how you figure out the length that you need is when you measured your arm from the center of your neck to your wrist. That number, you're going to subtract half of your back panel measurement from that number. So what do I mean? My back panel is 20 inches wide. And when I take my measurement for my arm from the center of my neck to my wrist, I get 30 inches. So if I divide my back panel in half, I have 10 inches. I subtract 10 inches from my arm measurement of 30 inches. I now need 20 inches of sleeve for me to attach to my cardigan for it to make it to my wrist. To that measurement, I'm just adding about 1 inch because I don't like my sleeves to be too long. I like my sleeves to just fit with just a little bit of extra length, but not too much. So I'm making a sleeve that is 21 inches long. So all I did was I continued working my rows until I was about 4 inches shorter. And why 4 inches shorter is because I have 2 inches for my wrist ribbing, and then I need 2 inches in which to work my decrease to get to my wrist before I add the ribbing. So what you're going to do for me right now is you're going to chain as wide as you need. So just chain until you have your desired width for your sleeve. And then you're going to work your rows up to as many rows you need to get to 4 inches less than your overall sleeve length. So for me, my sleeve length is 21 inches in total. So then I just worked my sleeve until I got to 17 inches. So what you're gonna do for me right now, I'm not gonna work the sleeve with you because I'm pretty confident that you already know the stitch pattern, you know how to chain and work the stitches. So I'm going to leave you to work your sleeve, you're going to chain as wide as you need it. Your armhole depth times 2 is your width, and then you're going to just do your quick calculation for your sleeve length, and you're going to work your sleeve until you have 4 inches of sleeve left to work. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to leave how to work out the measurements in the description as well. So go ahead and make your sleeves and then come back and I will work the wrist decrease and adding the ribbing with you. I'm just about finished my second sleeve and I am at the point now where I'm going to start decreasing my stitches. I'm going to be decreasing my stitches by about half. My sleeve is 48 stitches wide, and when I'm finished, I'm going to have 24 stitches. So on the first row of my decreases, I'm going to start working into the top of the stitches. I'm not going to be working the offset stitches anymore. So I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to chain 1. And I'm going to be working 1 half double crochet and then half double crochet 2 together, 1 half double crochet, half double crochet 2 together all the way across the row. So I'm going to start by working a half double crochet in my first stitch. And then I'm going to half double crochet 2 together my next 2 stitches. So I'm going to yarn over and insert into the stitch like I normally would when working a regular half double crochet, pull up a loop, and then I'm going to insert into the next stitch, pull up a loop, and I have 4 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 4 loops. So I've now decreased by 1 stitch. In the next stitch, I'm going to work 1 half double crochet, and then I'm going to work a decrease over the next 2 stitches. So I'm going to yarn over, insert into the first hook stitch, pull up a loop, then insert into the next stitch, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on my hook. The next stitch, I'm going to work a half double crochet. And then for the next 2 stitches, I'm going to half double crochet 2 together. And that's how I am going to continue working across my row, by working 1 half double crochet and then half double crochet 2 together the next 2 stitches. So continue working like that all the way across your row, and I'll meet you at the end of this row. I've completed my first row of decreases, and now for my next row, what I'm going to be doing is just working a row of half double crochet all the way across. And not offset half double crochet, just regular half double crochet stitches. We're going to be working under the top 2 loops, just like you would a normal half double crochet stitch. So I'm going to chain 1 and work a half double crochet in each stitch all the way across. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back, we'll count our stitches and see how many stitches we have left for our final row of decreasing. I've finished working my half double crochets, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to count my stitches and then see how many more stitches I need to decrease by. So I now have 32 half double crochet all the way across, and I started with 48. Now to get down to 24, I need to decrease by 8 more stitches. So now what I'm going to do is, instead of working a decrease in every other stitch, I'm going to be working 2 stitches and then a decrease. And if you have, say your row is really long and then you only need to decrease a few stitches, try to do most of your decreasing in the center rather than on the edges. So just kind of get some stitch markers and just lay out how many stitches you need to decrease. If I were to do that, I would do this. So I decided I'm going to do a decrease every 2 stitches. So I would count 1, 2, and then I know these 2 stitches are going to be worked together. So I will put a stitch marker in the second stitch to say that's going to be a decrease, and then 2 stitches. So I have the 2 stitches I would work into, and then these 2 stitches are going to get worked together. So then that's another decrease. And then I'm going to work 2 stitches and then a decrease. And then you continue doing that across your row based on how many stitches you need to decrease. And then you can move the stitch marker around to make sure that they're all evenly spaced. So go ahead and map out how many stitches you need to decrease by. I'm going to start my decrease. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to chain 1, I'm going to turn my work, and now I'm just going to work a half double crochet in the first stitch and a half double crochet in the next stitch. And now I'm going to work 2 half double crochet stitches together. I'm going to yarn over, insert into that first stitch, pull up a loop, insert into the next stitch, pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on my hook. Then I'm going to work a half double crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then I'll work a decrease. So I'm going to work these 2 stitches together. And then I'm going to work 2 stitches. That's 1, 2, and then I'll work a decrease, and I'm going to continue doing that all the way across my row. So you go ahead and work your decreases all the way across your row, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. I have finished working my decreases, and because I know this is my final row of working decreases, before I work my next row, I'm going to count my stitches to see if I have the correct number of stitches that I'm going for before I move on. So I have 24 stitches, so I'm good. I can work my next row, but what I also like to do before I move on, I like to pull up that loop really high, and then I'll fold my sleeve in half, and then I'll rest my arm into the sleeve, and the widest part of my arm right here, I'm going to have it over this. And I want to make sure that my arm will go comfortably in and out of that opening before I finish off, just so I don't finish and then it's really tight and I have to wedge my hand in here. So if your hand goes comfortably through the opening, then you're good to go. My arm's going in nice and comfortably. I don't have to stretch it to get my hand in, so I am okay. And now I am going to work 1 more row of half double crochet. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll come back and we'll start on the first row of our ribbing. I've completed my final row of half double crochet. So now I'm going to work my setup row for my ribbing, which is going to be a row of single crochet. So with my same hook that I've been using for the main body, I'm going to work a row of single crochet, and then I'm going to switch to my smaller hook. So go ahead, chain 1 and work a row of single crochet. So 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way across your row, and I'll meet you when you get to the end of your row. I have finished my row of single crochet, so now I'm going to remove my hook and I'm going to switch to my smaller hook. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to chain. I'm just going to work a chain until I have about 2 inches. So I'm going to work a few. And then I'll just lay it down and measure, and I'll keep working until I have 2 inches. First time. So there I have 2 inches. And then what you want to do is you want to just count how many chains you have. So when you work your second sleeve, you don't have to do it again. What we're going to do is we're going to start working single crochet in the back loop only of our rows. So we're going to start working down our chain, and then we'll slip stitch to our single crochets on the wrist of our sleeve and just continue working like that, but I'll do that with you. So we're going to skip the first chain, and then we're going to work a single crochet through the back loop of the next chain. So just insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and you're going to continue working single crochet all the way down the chain. Once you've worked into your final chain, so just count the stitches to make sure you didn't work into the top of the first stitch. I've counted my chains, I've worked into each one. Now I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. I'm not going to slip stitch into the first one. I'm going to skip this first one and then work a slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. So again, don't slip stitch into this first stitch that the chain is connected to. Slip stitch 2 into the next 2. So skip 1, 1, 2. 1, 2, and now we're going to turn and we're going to work our way back up. But what you want to do is skip your 2 slip stitches. So if you're looking at it, you're going to count back 1, 2, and then you're going to start working into this stitch right here. So you're just going to insert your hook under the back loop and then work a single crochet, and then through the back loop only all the way up your row, working single crochet stitches. When you get to the end of the row, you're going to chain 1, turn, and work, coming right back down your row. And once you've worked into all your stitches, you're now going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. You won't be skipping any more stitches from this point on. So looking at it, you're connected to this stitch right here. So now you're going to work a slip stitch in the next 2 stitches. And the reason why when you work your first row, you don't slip stitch into the first stitch is because your chain was already connected to that stitch. From this point on, you need to now connect your rows to the 2 stitches below. So because we skipped that first one and we slip stitched into the next 2 stitches and we worked 1 row up, 1 row down, that accounts for those 2 stitches. So now we just slip stitch into 2 stitches, 1, 2, and now when we turn our work, we skip those 2 slip stitches and we're going to work 1 row going up and 1 coming back down. So I'll do that and then I'll meet you when I need to slip stitch to my next 2 stitches. I've completed those 2 rows and now I'm going to slip stitch in the next 2 stitches, and just always be sure to pay close attention so you don't slip stitch into a stitch that you've already done so. So if you pull, just hold your hook like this, it's always going to pull on the stitch that's already been worked into. So now you know you worked into this one because it's pulling up at the top of the stitch, and then now I need to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. And now I'm just going to turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, and then start working single crochet in the back loop up the row and then back down. And just continue working like that. You're going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. You're going to work up, come back down, slip stitch in the next 2 stitches, work up and come back down. And just continue doing that until you get to the end of the row. I'm going to come back when I have about 2 rows left to work. So just continue working and I'm going to come back when I have a couple of rows left to work. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end of my row. And what's going to happen when you get to the end, you're either going to have 2 stitches or 1 stitch left. I have 3 left, which means I have 3 rows left to work. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to first work as if to say you only had 2 stitches left at the end of your row, and I'll tell you how to finish off, and then I'll go and show you what to do if you only have 1 stitch left. So if you only have 2 stitches left, what you're going to do is, like you've been doing this whole time, you're going to work a slip stitch in your last 2 stitches. So if these are your last 2 stitches, you'll go ahead and work a slip stitch in each. So that would be 1, 2, and then you're going to work 2 rows and you're going to end right back down at the end. So I'm going to work these 2 rows and then come back and show you how to fasten off. Okay, so I've finished those 2 rows and I'm holding on to my last stitch to make it seem as if I don't have 1 stitch left. And if this is how you ended your row, you had 2 stitches left, you would work up and then come down, and then what you would do is the very last stitch that you worked a slip stitch into, you're going to work another slip stitch in here. So you're just going to insert into your last stitch again, yarn over and pull through, then cut your yarn and fasten off. That would be it. You would be done. Now, if you end and you have one stitch left, this is what you're going to do. You're going to slip stitch into this last stitch. You're going to turn and you're going to work your final row going all the way up. So I'll meet you at the end of this row here. You would skip one stitch because you only slip stitched once, and then you work up your row. So go ahead and do that. Okay, and once you're finished that row, since you have no more stitches down here, you're going to work a slip stitch right here, and then you're just going to cut your yarn and fasten off. That's the end. What I like about when I fasten off at the end of the row here, I can leave a long tail for sewing it in, but if not, you can just cut the yarn, weave in that end, and then we'll move on to sewing the pieces together. So once you're finished making your sleeves, you cut your yarn, fasten off, and then come back and we'll piece it all together. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew the pieces together before finally adding the ribbing around the neckline and the hem. So our first step is to attach our front panel to our back panel. I've already attached one of my front panels, and then I'm going to show you how to attach my second one. All you're going to do is, where we left our stitch markers, we just need to attach our front panel to the remaining stitches on the other side of the stitch marker. So like I did here, I have a stitch marker here, and I had the same number of stitches on my front panel as I do the shoulder of my back panel, and then I just sewed those stitches together, and I'm going to do the same on this side. So I'm just going to take my piece, and I'm going to lay it down against my back panel. And if you need to grab some stitch markers to do this, just to make sure everything lines up, go ahead and do that. And then I will have the same number of stitches along the top of my front panel as I do on this side of the stitch marker on my back panel. And I'm just going to use the mattress stitch to sew these stitches together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you can go ahead and sew your front panels to your back panel. And then we'll come back and we'll attach our sleeves. I have finished attaching my front panels to my back panel, and now I'm going to move on to attaching my sleeves. And to ensure that your sleeve is attached evenly down the front and back of your sweater, your cardigan, what you want to do is, however many stitches you started with, you want to divide it by 2. And I know I started with 48 stitches. So I know I have 24 stitches down here, and now I'm going to have to match those stitches up with rows. So for each stitch, I'm going to be sewing into 1 row. So I know I need 24 rows going down my back panel and 24 rows going down my front panel to ensure my sleeves have been attached evenly. So grab some stitch markers, and then I will count my rows. So I have 1, 2, then I place a stitch marker, and then I just do the same down the front. And then I'll count my stitches on my sleeves. And then I will attach this stitch to the top, to the side of this row. And in that way, I know that from this point down my sleeve, I have 24 stitches. So all these stitches get sewn onto my back panel, and then all the stitches on this side get sewn onto my front panel, just to ensure that the sleeve is even on the front and the back of the cardigan, so it doesn't fit weird. So go ahead and do that, and then attach your sleeves to your cardigan. And then what you will do after that is you're just going to sew the side of the sleeves together and then down the side of the cardigan. So go ahead and finish sewing everything together, and then we'll come back and attach our ribbing. Now it's time to move on to our ribbing. I'm going to start on the hem. So once you have all your pieces sewn together, my cardigan's done. I've done my side seams, across my arms, everything's all sewn together. So now I'm gonna start on my ribbing. And you're just gonna lay your cardigan flat and you're going to grab the hem of the left front panel. So you're gonna start at the front and work your way around. I'm gonna grab my yarn, make a slip knot, and just place a slip knot on my hook. And we're going to start with the hook that we use for the main section of the cardigan. So start with your bigger hook. And what we're going to do is we're going to work a row of single crochet all the way around the hem. So I'm just gonna, with the slip knot on my hook, I'm gonna work a standing single crochet in this first stitch here. So I'm gonna insert my hook into the first stitch. I'm gonna hold on to the tail, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through both loops on my hook. And now I have a single crochet in my first stitch here. I'll show you that one more time. So with the slip knot on my hook, I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch. Just hold on to the tail, yarn over, pull up a loop in that stitch, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook. And now we're just going to work a single crochet in each stitch all the way around the hem of our cardigan. So go ahead and work your single crochets all the way around until you get to the other side of your cardigan, and then I'll meet you there. I have completed my single crochet all along my hemline. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take out my larger hook and switch to my smaller hook. And then what I'm going to do now is similar to what we did on the ribbing of the cuffs. We're just going to chain until our chain is as long as we need it to be. And I'm going to go for 4 inches. So I'm just going to chain. And then we're good. So I've got my 4 inches. I'm just going to add one more chain because that's my turning chain. And then I'm going to start working my ribbing. So like we did on our wrist cuffs, we're going to skip the first chain and just work a single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and each chain all the way down until you get to your single crochet. So I'm going to skip that first chain and I'm going to work a single crochet in the second chain, and then I'm going to work a single crochet in each chain all the way down until I get to my hemline. I've worked into each chain all the way down and now I'm at my hemline. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to skip this first stitch right here and I'm going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. So I'm skipping the first stitch that's attached to the chain and then slip stitching into the next 2 stitches. 1, 2, and then I'm going to turn, skip the 2 slip stitches, and then just work a single crochet under the back loop only of the next stitch, and in each stitch all the way up the row and then back down. I have worked all the way down the row and now I'm going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches and then repeat the process. So just remember, once you get to the end and you're working your slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, just be careful that you don't slip stitch into a stitch you've already done so. So I've come down, I've already slip stitched into that one, so now I know I'm slip stitching into these 2 stitches right here. So that's 1, 2, and then we turn, skip the 2 slip stitches, and then we're going to work our single crochet under the back loop only, up the row, chain 1, turn, and come back down, and just repeat the process the exact same way we did when we were doing the ribbing on our cuffs. So go ahead, do that, and work your ribbing all along your hemline, and when you get back round to the other side, I will meet you there, and then we will work on the ribbing for the front of our cardigan. I have completed the ribbing along the bottom of my cardigan and now I'm going to start working up the front. So what I'm going to do is, because for myself I finished here, so now I can just, without fastening off, I can continue working up. If you ended right here on your ribbing, just fasten off and then you'll rejoin your yarn here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take out my smaller hook and I'm going to grab my bigger one. And then I'm just going to chain one, and I'm going to start working single crochet stitches in each of the stitches of my ribbing, and then in one stitch in the side of each row up the front of my cardigan. So I'm going to go ahead and work into the side of the ribbing, and then I will meet you when I'm about to start working into the side of the rows going up the front of my cardigan. So I've worked into each stitch of the ribbing, and now I'm going to start working into the side of the rows up the front of my cardigan. And the first stitch I'm going to work into is the side of the single crochet, because when we were before we started our ribbing, we added a row of single crochet to which we attached our ribbing. So I'm going to make sure I work into the side under 2 loops of that last single crochet here. Sometimes a little tricky because you've also already slip stitched into the top of the stitch to attach your ribbing. So just careful not to split your yarn. Get under the 2 loops on the side of the stitch and work a single crochet. And now you're going to just start working into the side of each row, and you're going to work 1 single crochet in the side of each row. So just go under 2 loops on the side of the row, going up the front, working a single crochet in the side of each row. And then you're going to continue working 1 single crochet in the side of each row up the front of your cardigan until we get to where the front of the cardigan meets the back. We're going to be working 2 stitches together right along here. So go ahead and work single crochets all the way up until you get to here, and I'll meet you here. I'm now in the corner here where the front panel meets the back, and what I want to do is, when I was sewing my pieces together, I still left my stitch marker in here because this is the stitch I didn't work into. So I know I have sewn into this stitch right here, so I don't want to work into this one or you're going to end up with a big hole on the shoulder. So what I'm going to do here is, in this final row of my front panel, I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over and pull up a loop. And now into this stitch here where I have my stitch marker, I'm going to take the stitch marker out. And then I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, just so I close up what would have potentially been a hole right here, just because there's so much space between the stitches where you were sewing into this stitch here from the front and the back. And then if you did, I'll show you how it looks if I worked 1 stitch and then 1 stitch, and why I did 2 together right here. So if I went ahead and I already worked there, so now I'm going to work a stitch here, and then I'm going to skip over the one that I sewed into and go in here. What happens is you tend to have a giant hole on your shoulder. So I'm going to take my hook out, and then I'm going to single crochet 2 together, which pulls the stitches tight together to then prevent you from seeing the hole that would have been there. And now I'm going to continue working single crochets along the back of the neck, and then I will come meet you in the corner here. We'll do the single crochet 2 together again, and then I'll leave you to finish working your single crochets down the other side of the cardigan. I am now at my other stitch marker. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. I'm not going into this one here because I know I've already sewn into it. So now I'm going to pull up 2 loops on the first row of the other side of my cardigan. So I'm just going to insert my hook under 2 loops on the side, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through all 3. So we don't have a hole here. And now I'm just going to continue working 1 single crochet in the side of each row down the other side of my cardigan. So continue doing that, and I will meet you when we get to the hemline to start adding the ribbing for the front of the cardigan. I have completed my row of single crochet all the way around. I'm now back to the end of the hemline on the other side of my cardigan. Now I'm going to switch to my smaller hook. I'm going to grab my tape measure. And now for the ribbing on the front, it's going to be 3 inches. So now I'm going to chain until I have about 3 inches. Just going to lay that down. All right, and I have my 3 inches. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 1 for my turning chain, and I'm going to skip the first chain and then just work a single crochet in the next chain and in each chain down, just like we did when we worked the ribbing on the wrist cuffs and on the hem. You're just going to continue working your ribbing in exactly the same way. And remembering when you get down to the end of your chain and you're going to start to slip stitch across. Don't slip stitch into the first stitch, just go into the next 2 stitches. So always skip the stitch attached to the chain and then your first 2 slip stitches in the next 2 stitches. And you're going to turn, remembering to skip those 2 slip stitches and then work up your row. And then just continue doing that just like you did on your hemline all the way around the front of your cardigan until you get back down to the other side. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you when I am finished with my ribbing. I have completed my ribbing and now my cardigan is almost finished. All I have to do now is attach my pockets. I have made my pockets and I'm going to walk you through how to make your pocket and then I'm going to show you how to attach it. I'm not going to physically show you how to make the pocket because at this point you already know how to work the stitch pattern. Your pocket needs to be 7 inches wide and 7.5 inches tall. So all you're going to do is, like you've been doing, chain until you have 7 inches wide and you're going to work your rows until you have 6 inches. And then for your final 1.5 inches, you're just going to use your smaller hook to work the applied ribbing across the top of your pocket. You're just going to chain until you have 1.5 inches and then work your ribbing. So the body of the pocket is 6 inches and then you're just going to add 1.5 inches of ribbing at the top and that's it. And that'll give you a pocket that is 7 inches tall, 7.5 inches tall and 7 inches wide. Now I'm going to show you how to sew your pocket onto your cardigan. Your first step is going to be to lay your cardigan flat, smooth it out and make sure it's folded evenly along the side seam so you have the complete front panel laying flat and facing you. Then you want to place your pocket on your cardigan about 1 inch away from your ribbing. So your ribbing starts here and you want to place your pocket 1 inch above your ribbing and fairly centered in the front of your panel. Then you're going to grab some stitch markers and you're going to count how many stitches you have along your pocket. And then you also want to now count out that same number of stitches on your front panel because you want your pocket evenly attached to your front panel so it doesn't pucker and start to bunch up and do weird things. So I have 20 stitches across. So I'm going to grab my stitch marker and I'm going to pick up a stitch on the front of my cardigan. And then I am going to attach that stitch marker to the first stitch on the right of my pocket. Then I'm going to grab another stitch marker and I'm going to count. So on the row which you attached the first corner of your pocket, you're going to count along that row however many stitches you have. So this first one is 1. And now I have my 20th stitch here. I'm going to take my stitch marker and pick up the front of that stitch and then attach it to my pocket. And now I'm going to do the same in rows. So I know I have been attached to this row and I'm going to count how many rows I have and then count that many rows until I get to the base of my ribbing. I have 18, so now I'm going to count from here where I attached the stitch marker to the front of the pocket. I'm going to count that row as 1, When I get to the 18th row, because that's how many rows I have on my pocket, I'm going to grab another stitch marker. I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm inserting my hook under the legs of the stitch. I'm going to zoom in for you in a second. So just insert your stitch marker under that stitch and then into the side of the final row of offset stitches. And you're going to repeat this on the other side. And just to ensure that you have 20 stitches between this stitch marker and this one, you're just going to fold your pocket down and count from this stitch marker to this one to make sure you have the exact number of stitches. And then if you don't, just move them to make sure you only have, for me, I have 20 stitches. So I know from this stitch marker to this one, there should be 20 stitches. I'm one stitch over, so I'm just going to take my stitch marker out, place it into stitch number 20, reattach it to my pocket, and then I know I'm all nice and even. So now for the ribbing, you're going to, for every one half double crochet, you're going to use that one stitch to sew 2 single crochet stitches to the front of your cardigan. So I have one stitch here, and I'm just going to go 1, 2 single crochet, and I'm just going to go through that stitch and pick up the second single crochet. So I know I'm going to work those 2 single crochet stitches into that half double crochet, and then for the other half double crochet, I'm right there. So then I count 1, 2, and then I'm just going to continue doing that. And then I have 1 stitch left that I will sew into the next stitch. All right, so now I'm all ready to go, and I can repeat the process on that side. So once you have all your stitch markers in, now it's time to sew your pocket to your cardigan. So you're just going to grab a tapestry needle, and you're going to get some yarn. You're going to take the cut end of your yarn and place it at the top of your pocket. You're going to go around 1, 2, 3. So you're just going to go around your pocket 3 times, and you're going to cut your yarn and put it on a tapestry needle. I'm going to be starting at the top of my pocket, working my way down, and then going around the other side. So I'm going to insert my tapestry needle under the front legs, the 2 front legs of the stitch. If you want to, I'm going to go right under the legs of the stitch and then through the single crochet. I'm going to pull through. I'm actually going to make a knot right here. And now I'm going to take out that stitch marker. And now into this one, I'm going to sew these 2 stitches. I'm going to go under the 2 legs, through 1 single crochet. I'm using the whip stitch instead of the mattress stitch here, so we're just going to go in and then come back out. So I'm going to go back under that same stitch again, then into the other single crochet, and just pull my yarn through. You want to pull your yarn snug, but don't yank it too tight because you really don't want to pull on the stitch too much. You just want to pull it until it's nice and taut and secure. Take the stitch marker out, under the 2 legs, through 1 stitch. All right, now I'm through my ribbing, and now I'm just going to be working into the sides of stitches. So you're going to pick up the 2 legs on the front of the stitch, and then you're just going to go under 2 loops on the side of the stitch, of the pocket. Pull through. Now you go down one. And because you've already counted out your rows, once you look at it and you've worked into that stitch, you're just going to go into the stitch below it and then through the side of your pocket. Pull your yarn through. And you're just going to keep working like that until you get down here. Then I'll work across with you and then leave you to finish it off. I've completed working into all the stitches along the sides, so now I'm going to show you how to go along the base of the pocket. I'm going to take that stitch marker out. And whereas before we were working under the front legs of the stitch, I don't want to pull the front of the stitch up toward the pocket. So what I'm going to do now is the space in between the stitches is the front loop of the stitches from below. So you're going to go under the front loop of those stitches. So you're just going to work in between your stitches now, picking up the front loop of the stitch below and then whip stitching. So now I have these two stitches here. I'm going to go in between and pick up the front loop and then through that stitch. And I'm going to continue doing that all the way across the base of the pocket. Because essentially you're trying to match the direction the stitches are going in when you're sewing the pocket, and you don't want to pull the stitches in different ways than they're supposed to go. Just so everything lays down nice and flat. So I'm just going to go under the front loop of the stitch below, through the base of that stitch, and then work across. So just continue doing that across the base of your pocket, and then work the same way you did on this side, picking up the side of the pocket and the legs of the stitches going up the cardigan, and then just sew all the way up the other side. So just go ahead, finish attaching your pocket, and then do your other one, and then your cardigan will be all done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and possibly learned something new along the way. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and bye for now.